the fundamental basis with which this is a very integral session on biomedical research with biomedical ethics as a fulcrum. So in today's session, we will be having the introduction and why do we need, in the sense like all of us are doctors, we have been trained, we have taken the Hippocrates oath, and we have been trying to follow the principles of primum non nocere, that is, first do no harm. That itself is sufficient. But why we need to know about it? The introduction very shortly, Dr. Shalini Nui ma'am will join us and we'll be having that session. Followed by the Indian Council of Medical Research has a broad framework starting from 1980s. The framework has been given, the rules, regulation, and SOPs are in place for us to follow, adhere to, and practice. And on the basis of the ICMR, we have the DCGI giving us a structure for formation of the ethics committee, who should be the members, what should be the SOPs of the ethics committee, and how the ethical review of a protocol happens, especially involving human subjects. So biomedical research on human subjects is the focus, because we have an animal ethics committee and we have an animal ethics as well. But the focus of today's discussion would largely be limited to human ethics and the institutional ethics committee. Anuradha ma'am will talk about what are the processes and procedures that we have in the institution, how when a proposal or a protocol is submitted to the scientific review, and the ethics committee provides the approvals post discussions, what should be the thing that needs to be done. And also, if there is an adverse event, if there is an SAE, how that needs to be reported, what are the formats, what are the templates, what the formats for informed consent, what has changed in the last 3 to 4 years, especially during COVID. There have been certain disruptions in the way we collect data, in the way we process data, in the way we do research. So some of those disruptions that have happened, and electronic approvals, electronic consent for informed consent has also been done. So that component will be discussed. And as I told, publication ethics and authorship, when it comes to making your research disseminate to others, there are certain ethical principles. We have the COPE guidelines, we have the guidelines from the International Journal Editors, International Consortium of Medical Journal Editors, ICMJE, and that guidelines has been adopted by the institution suo moto. It's an international Helsinki and that kind of a guideline. So we have adopted suo moto to say that like the author should fulfill certain characteristics, and that session will be head by Dr. Tanuja, where we will be knowing many a times in our confusion, we tend to sort of like not do something which ought to be done or overdo something, nothing to worry about. As long as you state and explicitly say, is there a conflict of interest? Is there another author whom you have included? For defining that role as per the COPE guidelines and the IJMC guidelines, it is absolutely fine to have multi-author, multidisciplinary, and also change or deviation to the protocol. Many a times we might not be able to fulfill exactly the way we would have presented it in the beginning. Yeah. So in that context, whenever we are trying to understand and have this, I lost my. Sorry. No, I was telling about the authorship. Yeah. So if there is a deviation in the protocol, then you can always come back to the ethics committee and request for a change in the protocol, but that is essential. So many times we fear that, oh, what will happen? This has been approved, and so hiding is not what is required for ethics. Ethics is like being transparent, being open, and being fair and being truthful. So as long as there is only single version of the truth. So ultimately the entire principles, entire thing boils on that what is right as defined by the right, and whether you have been practicing it in the right manner. So probably I think madam will be joining a little bit later. What I will do is I will take you through the sections of the ICMR bioethics module. And from 1980, they have got these what you call as guidelines. 80, 94, 98, 2004, 2007, 2017 version is what is the relatively recent version with some modifications during the COVID. And post Balram Bhargava, who is the current ICMR director and the DHR chair, cardiologist from AIMS. So apparently, sir is supposed to have told Roli Mathur, who is the author of this chair of this committee for bioethics, the original book of bioethics has 170 pages or something. He has told us, like, as clinicians, it's very difficult to go through the entire thing. Can you make an abridged version highlighting the essentials so that a clinician or a doctor or anyone who wants to do this research is abreast of what needs to be done? So there is a handbook which I will go through it. It has got 12 sections which summarizes the details of the entire guidelines. So this is the National Ethical Guidelines for Biomedical and Health Research involving human participants. As I told, there is an Animal Ethics Committee, Animal Ethics Guideline. So this is from the Human Ethics Guidelines provided by the ICMR 2017, and this is a 2019 abridged version, 28 pages. Yes, this is a 2018 abridged version which has been provided. So what the table of contents shows you is, for each section of the main book, there is a 2-page or a 3-page summary in this book. So I will just run through that so that you will be knowing what are the various sections under which the bioethics thing has been organized. So the general principles, which when we create a video on evolution of ethics, by and large for forensic medicine, MCQs, we would have studied it during our undergraduate days. So the Helsinki or the Belmont or the Nuremberg Code, all these will be the evolution of ethical principles and how, as medical science has evolved, first we need to have this autonomy, the non-maleficence, justice, and beneficence. Those principles, followed by the general ethical issues which needs to be addressed during the course of research, because the research is experimental. The research is something where you intervene. Even in observational studies, not doing something which you ought to do amounts to a deviation. So probably ma'am, when she speaks about it, some of those nuances you will be understanding. Then responsible conduct of research, because we are taking a special role here. As a principal investigator, as a researcher, the role that we are assuming is different from that of a layperson. So in that context, just continue there. So this is the general thing about the ICMR guidelines. So the ethical responsible conduct of research, then the procedures. So again, the procedures, what was happening earlier was each institution had their own approach, means and ways in which the ethical clearance were to happen. So they were not that like it was correct or wrong, but there was sort of like differences in the procedures, and as a consequence, what was passed as approved in one institution might have not been approved in another institution. So the uniformity of certain approvals, how the SOPs have to be there, what are the guidelines, madam will talk about it, and now there is a DCGI and the required, like these should be the members, these should be the SOPs. These are the documents that needs to be submitted at the time of approval. The informed consent form should have the information, because earlier informed consent again was very wide and it was different. It was subjective. It was saying that like I am participating voluntarily and I have been explained thoroughly. The words were there, but not the content. So in that sense, like standardization of these procedures have happened as a consequence of the ICMR specific guidelines, where we see that what are the things. The informed consent process itself has been very clearly defined. It also been made very stringent, because this was one of the things where we were seeing that like a form is attached, but many a times when the ethics committee members question the participants, especially from an IND, investigation new drug application point of view, there were gaps. There were many times the patients were sort of like coerced, or they were given incentives to take part of the trials. So in that context, the informed consent has been standardized. and many a time for high-risk procedures and other things, a video consent in the language of the respondent is what is being taken in. Then you have this concept of vulnerability, which refers to a person's inability to fend for themselves as a consequence of physical, physiological, psychological, or any other characteristic, which means that if the person is not able to give a opinion or their refusal or participation, or because of a disease, if there is something which is different from that individual, which makes them at a susceptible higher risk to that particular thing, it is called as vulnerability, and those issues have been described and explained over there. Then you have the clinical trials of drugs and other interventions. 2019 and 2018 and 19, there was a revised version of biomedical ethics and principles and guiding for observational studies, for academic trials, because they realized that in medical colleges, many of the postgraduates do these thesis where it might be an RCT, there might be a drug, they might be looking at efficacy of a particular thing. So in such instances, aren't we violating the fundamental principles of research? So the clear-cut guidelines were given that any research in any clinical or other thing needs to pass through the ethics committee, and it should be the exemptions. Many times we hear researchers saying that, sir, this is just a questionnaire. We are not intervening in anything. This is an observational study. This is a survey. Absolutely fine. But let it pass through the thing, and the exemption will be decided by the committee whether it comes under that category of exemption as a thing. So most or many of the indexed good journals today ask for an ethics clearance as a prerequisite for them to accept the article for review. It's not about publishing, it's about even for acceptance, they ask this letter of submission. So that is with regards to clinical trials. Public health research and social and behavioral sciences research, this is what I was saying. So anonymized, population level data, secondary data, data from aggregate sources, even there is an ethical principle, because it can have a bearing on that community, that ethnicity, that racial thing. If you say that this practice is predominantly in a region or a community, that will have a bearing on so many things. So we need to be sensitive and sensible when we do this public health, social and behavioral science research. Human genetics testing and research is again a separate category, and also there are specific requirements whenever we are going through a stem cell genetic and research. So that guidelines have been articulated very clearly. Plus, you have a stem cell research SOP and the guidelines for that. Biological materials, biobanking and data sets. We have a separate committee to regulate the movement of biological materials between the institutions, between the countries. Suppose we are collaborating with Cambridge, Oxford, or US institutions. If we want to send the samples, biological samples, if we want to receive the samples, we can do that, but there is a IHR committee where HMSC clearance from the ICMR needs to be obtained to say that we are doing this. So we are sending and we are receiving this. So the HMSC committee certification is required for undertaking those research. Then you have the research during humanitarian emergencies and disasters. A subsection of it is what the COVID research module that has been brought up as a separate module. And these are all the sections. And for want of time, I'm not going into the depth of it, but this handbook is available online in the ICMR website. Please download it and go through it once, which will give a broad idea about what the concepts are. And once you know the policies of the institution, and if you've read the contents, it would be very easy to align our protocols with what is required and what needs to be done. Ma'am will have a small video and no, we have not written. We have not given it. This was a section of the ICMR, second session.
Okay.
And few students, I mean, people, the faculty have joined on the online.
Okay. Thank you. What I thought was, I found a video on YouTube which very appropriately tells us about the history of research ethics. So I thought that will be a good starting point when we are thinking about research ethics and how it started. A part of which has already been spoken to, the present status, how ICMR has taken it up and it has started modifying it from time to time. I think the latest modification was in 2006, isn't it?
2017.
17 days. Yeah. So you can play the video now. Just have, see, I hope the volume, you can put up the slides.
Prior to 1906, when the Pure Food and Drug Act was passed, there were no regulations regarding the ethical use of human subjects in research. There were no consumer regulations, no Food and Drug Administration, no common rule, and no institutional review board. A well-known chapter in the history of research with human subjects opened on December 9, 1946, when an American military tribunal opened criminal proceedings against 23 leading German physicians and administrators for their willing participation in war crimes and crimes against humanity. Among the charges were that German physicians conducted medical experiments on thousands of concentration camp prisoners without their consent. Most of the subjects of these experiments died or were permanently crippled as a result. As a direct result of the trial, the Nuremberg Code was established in 1948, stating that the voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential, making it clear that subjects should give consent and that the benefits of research must outweigh the risks. Although it did not carry the force of law, the Nuremberg Code was the first international document which advocated voluntary participation and informed consent. In the late 1950s, thalidomide was approved as a sedative in Europe. It was not approved in the United States by the FDA. The drug was prescribed to control sleep and nausea throughout pregnancy, but it was soon found that taking this drug during pregnancy caused severe deformities in the fetus. Many patients did not know they were taking a drug that was not approved for use by the FDA, nor did they give informed consent. Some 12,000 babies were born with severe deformities due to thalidomide. U.S. Senate hearings followed, and in 1962 the so-called Kefauver Amendments to the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act were passed into law to ensure drug efficacy and greater drug safety. For the first time, drug manufacturers were required to prove to FDA the effectiveness of their products before marketing them. An equally well-known chapter in history occurred during a research project conducted by the U.S. Public Health Service. 600 low-income African American males, 400 of whom were infected with syphilis, were monitored for 40 years. Free medical examinations were given, however, subjects were not told about their disease. Even though a proven cure, penicillin, became available in the 1950s, the study continued until 1972 with participants being denied treatment. In some cases, when subjects were diagnosed as having syphilis by other physicians, researchers intervened to prevent treatment. Many subjects died of syphilis during the study. The study was stopped in 1973 by the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. In 1964, the World Medical Association established recommendations guiding medical doctors in biomedical research involving human subjects. The declaration governs international research ethics and defines rules for research combined with clinical care and non-therapeutic research. The Declaration of Helsinki was revised in 1975, 1983, 1989, and 1996, and is the basis for good clinical practices used today. Issues addressed in the Declaration of Helsinki include: research with humans should be based on the results from laboratory and animal experimentation. Research protocols should be reviewed by an independent committee prior to initiation. Informed consent from research participants is necessary. Research should be conducted by medically or scientifically qualified individuals. And risks should not exceed benefits. Finally, the Belmont Report was published in 1979, with attempts to summarize the basic ethical principles identified by the Commission in the course of its deliberations. The report is a statement of the basic ethical principles and guidelines that should assist in resolving the ethical problems that surround the conduct of research with human subjects. The Belmont Report established 3 basic ethical principles: respect for persons, beneficence, and justice, which are the cornerstones for the regulations involving human subjects.
So this video, I thought, gives a good idea or a brief good idea about how the principles of ethics began in the world of research all over the world. And as you have noticed, it was the Nuremberg trials, which were done very unethically, which prompted the World Medical Association. At that time, the World Health Organization was the World Medical Association, and that was how it started. As the last sentence says, the 3 principles of ethics in research are beneficence or non-maleficence, do no harm, and whatever research we do should benefit the patient, respect for the patient. That means, first of all, take consent, and secondly, maintain their privacy or confidentiality, and thirdly, of course, justice. If there is any issue, they have to be provided justice. And if there is something, some drug that is useful to them, it should not be denied. So like what happened during the Tuskegee trials for people with syphilis, even though penicillin was available, they were not told that, and they were not given penicillin. So these are some of the principles that we should keep in mind when we are doing research. Of course, many details have been given to you by Dr. Nandakumar, and some more details will follow. We have to follow ethics at every stage of research, and all of these will be dealt with by the next few speakers. And finally, we should also see that we follow the ethical the protocols in the college with regard to ethics, like presenting your project proposal or your research work to the scientific committee and then to the ethical committee, which, as Dr. Nanda was saying, it is essential. Many publishers require us to submit the ethical committee approval before publication. So hope it's going to be useful. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next question is going to be by Dr. Tanuja of Technology. Going to talk about publication ethics.
Just give me a minute.
Can you excuse?
Yeah, ma'am. While we are setting up, are there any quick questions? I mean, like in the sense, like we will be covering by and large the things in the next two sessions. Are there any questions, online participants or people who are here, which you feel needs to be sort of like specifically addressed? If it's a review article, do we need an ethical clearance? PG thesis, the PG has not written the paper. We are writing as a faculty. Do we need to include the PG's name? Just hold these questions in your head. Probably after Dr. Tanuja's session, we will answer it. My wife is a doctor, not my wife, but a doctor's wife is also a doctor, and both of them have written a paper. Person A, and this question I'm saying from the BCBR course, a basic course for biomedical research exam Monday even I'm taking. So there they say that like a person, a psychiatrist has written a paper and his wife is in another department, physiology, is a co-author. Is it ethically correct? So just hold the thoughts. So we will discuss it. And you have a person from another institution who has supported you in the collecting the data. So can he or she be an author? And you have a person from another country who has reviewed your manuscript, a very big name. So can you include them as an author? So who can be an author? And you have someone who has given you permission, head of the department. Should they be the author or not? I'm asking some questions. Okay, so please hold those thoughts, listen to her, then we will sort of like find those answers.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you? I hope you're hearing me. I'm Dr. Tanuja, and you heard about research ethics. Now we're coming into publication ethics. So obviously, ethics starts with start planning the research, conducting it, and also culminates in publication. So what we're talking about? So before we go into publication ethics, let's just. I think this particular thing is in all of your memory. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, May 2020, we had everybody was using HCQS. Trump was propagating it, but suddenly there was, and WHO had started a clinical trial using HCQS. They wanted to see whether it is efficacious, and suddenly Surgisphere, a company from Illinois, came out with data of 10,000 patients from across 671 countries, not countries, places, clinical trials places. They said HCQS actually increased the death rates in the patients with COVID-19. Now, what did this do? Many WHO halted its clinical trial for almost a month. Governments revoked their policies. French government, in fact, immediately stopped using HCQS for all their patients. But what it also did was many scientists or many clinicians, intellectual people started looking into the data of this particular study. This was published in Lancet. Lancet is like the god of publications. I wouldn't say god, but it is held at one of the higher places. So everybody started looking, and then they said, this is impossible. 10,000 patients. The data itself is it fabricated? Is it falsified? I mean, show the data. So the Lancet editors asked for the data, but the company which had published, it was a company which was only into publishing. They said now they can't share the data. Okay, so it was a big scandal, and then they realized that all the data was fabricated. So what did Lancet do? It retracted this article. This was a huge scandal in medical field. Now, I mean, we know it. This is in a recent memory. We know this, but such things have happened in the past with vaccines in 2000, in the early 2000s, where they said vaccines cause autism, and it was autism. Vaccines were withdrawn, and it was a huge movement especially in the US. Now, so why we need to have publication ethics is we don't want to be in this position. We don't want to be in this situation. Now, obviously, I mean, you might say one article only was retracted. What will happen? But if you go into Google and see, this whole individual's whole career is questioned. There'll be a lot of articles saying that Mr. Mehra or the Sapan Das, who were the authors of that particular article, then each and every part of the life is being dissected openly on Google. So obviously we don't want to get into all these things. As researchers, we want only advanced science. We wouldn't want to get into these things. So what we're going to learn in this particular talk is there can be misconduct which can be intentional, but most of them are accidental. So at least let us try to avoid these accidental misconducts. Now, is this publication, misconduct or research misconduct? Is it only there in India? Not really. It is quite common. It is common all over the world. It's very difficult to evaluate every kind of misconduct, but there are many papers which have evaluated the number of retractions in each journal or a group of journals. So retractions are comparing OAJ, open access journals, to compare to PubMed. We see that after 2010, there have been a significant amount of retractions. The journals have retracted these articles quoting misconduct. Okay, so there is a lot of awareness. There is a lot of awareness, and people are identifying misconduct and retracting the published article. Now, again, what are the reasons? We'll learn about all these reasons as we go through this talk. Before 2007, most of them were authorship disputes. But as we go forward in 2013-17, there's a lot of paid review processes. So a lot of collaborations among authors with their own peers, and trying to get a paid review process and accelerated the publications. So let's see what are these, and the future slides. Now, coming to time from publication to the retraction of the articles, it was seen that authorship disputes are initially early. I mean, the authors initially refute the thing and write to the editor maybe. But fraud and data manipulation are something which take a lot of time. So an article can be retracted even after 3 years. So you have to be aware that it's not at all, once it is published, nothing will happen. The article can be retracted, and the author can be blacklisted even after 3 to 4 years. So one has to be very sure about what they're publishing and what they're putting up on the internet, on the journals. So again, when we went on to look whether plagiarism was more prevalent or what was, it was seen that plagiarism was more prevalent in low quality journals, whereas fake data was more prevalent in high quality journals, probably because high quality journals use plagiarism software and filter out all these cases beforehand. Is it common only in India? Not really. It is a worldwide problem. Every country, it is a worldwide, it is a problem. Of course, India stands in the top 5. So the number of retractions of Indian authors, India stands in the top 5. First is China, I think then Israel, Iran. And we do stand, so we need to be aware that we don't have a very good name out there, but again, I mean, we can, most of them might be accidental, but we need to be aware and be careful about what we are putting out there. I mean, there was a study which was very interesting, which was studied about retracted articles only from Indian authors. Again, plagiarism was the most important thing and fake data the next. Now coming to publication ethics, what are they? They are ethical standards for publication. Why do they exist? To ensure high quality scientific publications, so that the public trusts in scientific findings, and also that people are receive credit for their idea. Now it is very important, and when I talk about publication ethics, it is very difficult to define it. Probably I'll have to use vague terms like honesty, transparency, and all those things. So there is a committee on publication ethics which has given definitions, but most importantly, more than describing publication ethics, they describe what are the misconducts, and if a misconduct is detected, how do you go about and solve it? Okay, so the Committee on Publication Ethics Code gives the code of conduct and best practice guidelines for the journals. So most of the journals will be members of this. They're encouraged to be members of this code. So the editors are given guidelines and flow charts how they have to, if they find an issue, how they have to deal with it. If they have a problem, if despite all these things they have a problem, they can write to the forum of COPE, and the committee gets back to them of what they have to do after they detect a misconduct. So obviously we cannot define publication ethics. It's because it's very personal and you have to follow a certain standards, but it's very easy to describe misconduct. Now, before we go on to describing misconduct, why does misconduct happen? Reason why publication misconduct is very evident, isn't it? We all want publications, and publications have to happen fast because your career has to advance. You need promotions for it. But what happens if you do a publication misconduct? Waste time and money. If it is detected that you've done a misconduct, your whole career might be, I mean, you did to advance your career, but your whole career might be put behind. It contaminates the published scientific record. I mean, our whole purpose of doing research, putting out something, is to advance science. So basically, this kind of misconduct, maligns the scientific records. It hinders scientific advancement. And as a consumers of research, we're all consumers of research. We see something which has come out in a very good journal. Some of us might actually be changing our practices. Okay, I was giving antibiotics before surgery. Maybe it is not really essential. I will withdraw it. I will not give any antibiotics before surgery because there's no evidence for it. So individuals might be changing. I mean, we as an institution, we have institutional policies. But if you go to outside individual practitioners, they might just read articles and change their whole practices based on these. So it's very important that we don't get into this publication misconduct. Now, there are two types, basically, major classification. If you divide, it's fraud and questionable practices. Fraud, the next few slides I'll only be talking about publication misconduct frauds. Questionable practices are not so, I would call them minor, but they are not, I mean, they will not be ignored by the editors. They will be questioned. What are these? Something like you have a lot of data, and if you include the whole thing, you'll not get any significant value. Okay, so what you'll do, you will remove some and only put the subset. So basically, your whole research, the hypothesis is changed there, but you will only put a subset of this one, which gives you a statistically significant value, and you go ahead with it. Or you have a p-value of 0.054, but you'll round it off and say it is less than 0.05. These, you might think they're not significant, they're very minor, but they will be looked into, especially good journals when they send to reviewers. They look at your data, they look at your results, and they know immediately that this is not possible. Okay? So the questionable practices are usually sorted out by the journals before publication during the manuscript reviewing process. but we also need to be aware that it shouldn't happen. Now, so again, publication misconduct can be intentional or accidental. Now, intentional, I really can't comment about it, but accidental, we can definitely avoid it. And let's see what are these publication misconducts. There are various misconducts and levels. It starts from informed consent, your data, how you've collected, have you manipulated it, how you have written your article. After you've written, have you submitted at the submission process step? Have you done multiple submissions, duplicate publications, self-citations, or to begin with, actually the authorships? Who all you've included or who all you've excluded from the authorship, whom you've denied authorship, or finally, once you've submitted the fake review process. So we'll go into each one of them individually. So informed consent, I'm sure Anuradha ma'am will elaborate on this. But what you need to know is just a brief about our institutions, informed consent, and how they go about it. It's very important that if you're doing a clinical trial, a DCGI registered ethics committee approval is mandatory. Luckily for all of you, our ethics committee is DCGI approved. And also, if you're doing a clinical trial, it has to be registered with the Clinical Trials Registry of India. These are all happen prior to you starting your clinical trials. Okay, but is it when I'm talking about academic trials? Okay, all the studies that we are conducting. Yes, if they're not clinical trials, you don't have to register. But informed consent, ethical committee approval is a must. And when we go on to informed consent from all patients is necessary. You are doing 50 patients, you say, I'll have only 25 patients, 25 patients, less 25 patients, I don't want informed consent, is not accepted. Documented informed consent from each and every patient is required. And DCGI and ICMR templates are there. If you don't have a template of informed consent, you can follow them, you can download them from their websites and use them. And also always has to, obviously ma'am has shown you what is the declaration of Helsinki and all these things. You have to follow. The patient is the priority. You can't risk the life of the patient. The risk should not, overcome benefits. Benefits should always, benefit of the patient is the priority as a medical researcher for us. So that has to be kept in mind. And once that, you have to follow all the good clinical practice ethics. Now, some journals, the editorial board of journals may ask for documented proof of informed consent by the researchers if they have any doubt. And you need to be aware that if you have conducted a study, you have to keep them for a minimum of 5 years. So don't throw them away. Finished, I've sent it for publication, it is accepted, I will throw out the informed consent. No. Even after 3 years, if they might ask you, and you have to provide it to them. So if there is any issue with the ethics, the flowchart says the author is always given a chance to explain. If some reader sees this and says there is some ethical issues, they raise the issue, or a reviewer says that this study is not conducted according to ethical standards, then the journal, the editors will always ask the author for a chance. Author is given a chance for explanation. If he gives a satisfactory explanation, the publication is continued. If not, the concerned head of institutions will be informed about the author, and if they think there is some misconduct, the journal members for the particular, if you have done a PubMed, so the PubMed will have some journal members, or a Elsevier or Scopus. All the journal members will be informed about this particular author, and the authors can be blacklisted from the particular journal groups. Okay. What is data manipulation and research fraud? When you draw conclusions from data that are not generated by the study, that is called as fabrication. So you have a study, you do analysis, the statistician tells you there's nothing significant, but you'll say, do something and give me a statistically significant data. Okay, so that is possible. We have heard of all. You have heard statisticians say, I can give you any whatever you want. That is not how it has to be done. What is there, you give that. Even if it is statistically insignificant, you write that in your journal, in your manuscript. Don't give false data. So that is called fabrication. Now you have data which are generated by manipulating the data. So you would have heard PGs. I'm sure, I have heard, I don't know about others, that they take theses from some other college, So that is a data which they have not generated. Or take data from seniors, which was done 5 years ago. That is data which is generated by manipulating the data. Okay, so it is not done by a study conducted by them. That is falsification. So these are just the definitions, but both are wrong. It is also data manipulation also applies to images. You have taken an image, it has to be you. You can't use images from somebody else's article or journal. If you have used it, you have to give credit to that particular author. You have to, if there is a copyright issue in it, you write to the author, take permission from them, and only then you publish it. But don't think. I continue. Okay. So if you just think, oh, it's there on Google, it's readily acceptable, I'll just modify it and put it. It is not acceptable. Most of the journals now have softwares which can immediately detect that the image is modified. Right? So that is. But editors or reviewers are suspicious. Shall I continue? They want to complicate. Okay, we'll just continue. Okay, if editors or reviewers are suspicious at the time of review process, at the time of review process, they may not disclose the raw data sheet to confirm or alleviate the suspicion. Editors may also request for data sheets even after a few years of publication if sufficient doubt is raised. So it has to be data has to be preserved for a reasonably long period. When I say reasonably long, minimum of 5 years it has to be preserved. But then if you think you've done some malpractice, maybe more than that. So what does the flow chart say? Again, if there is suspicion about fabricated data, even before publication, when the reviewer says looks like a fabricated data, the authors are again given a chance to explain, and if the editor is convinced, then it is published. If it is not, then the manuscript is rejected, and also they try to inform the institution next. If it is already published, the most penal this one will be to retract the publication, or sometimes if it's a minor fabrication, if there's a minor changes in the data, then they ask for a correction. The author has to issue an erratum to the journal saying that this was a mistake done, which will be published. So, and then please delete these results. Okay. What is plagiarism? Now, use of this is a very which we all have to be very careful about this. Use of previously published work of another author in one's own manuscript without consent, credit, or acknowledgement, and fraudulently passing it as it's one's own work. So using somebody else's copy paste and say this is my work, that is plagiarism. Okay. So there are various levels of plagiarism. Clear plagiarism, literal copy paste. Take that copy and put it into your manuscript. That is copy paste. Paraphrasing, you take the idea, you use your own words, but still you're doing the same thing almost. Almost a replica of it. Recycling is one more term, which is self-plagiarism. So when an author uses the same text in multiple papers without citation of the prior work, is also called as it's also considered as plagiarism. Don't think, oh, it is my own thing. Should I even cite the previous article? You have to. Okay? So what happens when you have when the reviewers or the readers suspect? Usually it's the reviewers who suspect the plagiarism. They inform the authors, and if they think it's minor plagiarism issues, they ask them to correct it. If it's a clear plagiarism, they're again told you please go back, write it, rewrite it, or they're rejected. The manuscripts are rejected. Now, how can we overcome this? How to avoid it? So we have softwares. Turnitin. In our own institute, we have Drillbit. So Ravi, the IT team have access to it. So if you have an article, you have a manuscript ready, you can send it to them. They will run it through the software and give you a report. This is the plagiarism report. Okay? It usually comes in percentages. So how much it matches to the other articles. Usually most of the journals will accept up till 10%. Beyond that, it is not, it can vary from each journal. Beyond that is not acceptable. Like, many sentences in medicine you can't change. The patient presented with, all that will be considered as copying. Okay, so up till 10% is accepted. So be careful about this plagiarism. What is that? Then once we finish writing, we go on to submission level. So submitting an article, manuscript to multiple scientific journals at the same time is called as simultaneous submission, and it is not accepted. If you think, okay, this journal anyway will reject, so by the time, why should I waste time? I'll send it to another journal also, and if anything gets accepted, it is a good thing. So far, in 2 months, I will get it accepted. That is not acceptable. Okay, and this misconduct, this occurs at the discretion of the author. The author is solely, I mean, obviously for every misconduct, the author is responsible, but here he is doing an intentional thing. So it is not, I mean, it is the onus on the author. Okay, so what happens here? You send, however, it is, this journal takes 10 weeks. So don't send it to it. Or this journal takes 20 weeks. You send it to another journal. But once only after you get a decision from them, send it to another journal. There are possibilities that both accept. Then what will you do? Okay, it's not right. Again, when we say this is only to journals, you can submit or present a paper in conference. That will not be considered as research misconduct. You can present in conferences. The same thing you can send it to a journal also. Okay, that will not be considered as a misconduct. I'm sure Nanda sir will elaborate on that. What is duplicate publication? Duplicate publication is not as simultaneous publication. It is submitting a new manuscript, whole new manuscript. You again rewritten it, containing the same hypothesis, same discussion points, same data, but you have written it in a different way. Okay, different way of presenting, but it's the same data, and you're doing a duplicate publication. This most often happens with regional languages. So if you get a English something published in an English journal, and you change it into your language, Kannada. I mean, I don't know if we don't have Kannada. See, basically Euro, Spanish and French and all those things. They read, or Chinese. They rewrite in their language and publish. That is not acceptable. It's considered as unethical. What is Salami publication? So you have a article. You cut part of it and put it into another. So you have a result part, or some part of it. Same thing. You slice it and put it in another article. That is called as Salami publications. All these things can be easily detected by the journal editor. There are softwares to detect it, so please don't go into these things. The code provides clear guidelines on handicapping duplicate publications, and the usual thing is rejecting the manuscripts or revoking. Once if they've already published it, they are retracted. Okay. And this is one more thing. I mean, if you have performed a pilot study, you have published it. Now you want to include. You did with 50 patients. Now you want to include 200 patients. That is acceptable. You can do it. Okay. And so you want to, then you will exclude those 50 patients and include only the 150 patients. Okay. So with a larger sample size, same hypothesis, it does not amount to duplicate publication. It is acceptable. So what is self-citation? Citing one's own published work in subsequent papers that are out of concept of the research. So I did something in medical education, but I want to quote that here because and in one of the clinical study, and then want to increase my metrics. Everybody now is wants to increase the H index, the I10 index. So you want to make yourself good metrics in your Google Scholar or your ORCID. So that's not acceptable. If it is relevant, yes, you quote yourself, you cite yourself and publish it. But if it is not relevant, if it's an irrelevant thing, it is not acceptable. Coming to ethics with authorship. Before my talk, Dr. Nandakumar asked you a lot of questions about authorship. So let's go into this. So every journal has an authorship criteria based on the ICMJ, okay, International Council for
Medical Journal Editors.
Journal Editors. Okay, sorry about that. So this gives a definition of who is the author. So all persons designated as authors should qualify for authorship, and all those who qualify should be listed. So what does it mean? So all those who qualify should get authorship, and all those should be listed. You shouldn't exclude somebody, and all those whom you have listed should qualify. Yeah, the ICMJ describes 3 basic criteria that must be collectively met. One, there must be a substantial contribution. to the conduct of the study, including its conception, design, data acquisition, statistical analysis, and interpretation. The author should be involved in drafting or revising the article and for the approval of the final version. These three are a must. Okay. The first one, not every author will be involved in statistical analysis. Not every author will be involved in this, but they have to share the work. And but the last two, all authors should be part of it. What are ghost authors? Ghost authors are those who contribute substantially in the development of paper, but are not given authorship or acknowledgement in the published paper. So what do we mean by this? So a particular person writes very good. Okay? So you make him write all your whole manuscript. He's a ghost author. Sometimes you pay him. They usually paid money. Okay. These are ghost authors, and you don't acknowledge them. Then they become ghost authors. If you acknowledge their work, saying they reviewed the manuscript or they did manuscript development, then they don't become ghost authors because you're acknowledging them. But you pay somebody for their work or don't pay or whatever, they are ghost authors. What is gift authorship? Most of the questions asked by Dr. Nandakumar will be answered here. Refers to inclusion in the list of co-authors simply due to affiliation to an institute where the research was conducted. Gift authorship is typically provided, not necessarily, to heads of institutions or departments, even without significant contribution to a particular study. This happens worldwide. Don't think it only happens in our institute, happens only in India. No, this happens worldwide. So that is also a misconduct. We will not elaborate on it. Guest authorship is usually provided to individuals whose presence as a co-author significantly increases chances of acceptance of the manuscript. This author has many publications in this article, in this journal. You want to include him. Okay, but this particular author is a co-editor or associate editor of this particular journal. You put his name, and he's also happy to have one article in his name. So that becomes guest authorship. Okay, so when there is an issue about authorships, usually the journal will ask, the editors will ask the authors, corresponding authors, or will write to all the authors whether somebody's name can be added or removed from the manuscript, from the article. And usually it has to be a signed requisition sent to the editor of the journal, individual from each author. Only then they will change the add or remove the author. In Ramaya from DRP, we already have a publication authors template. So depending upon what contributions they have made, you can also assign the authorship from the beginning of the study. You can assign the authorship order, and also this actually follows the credit author statement or is similar to the ICMJ authorship statement. So it is quite helpful, and you can all go through it and use it. For the core system flowchart, how to identify the false authors or ghost authors or gift authorships. So if one particular there's no specified role in the acknowledgements, or if it's an unfeasibly long author list. For a case report, you have 10 authors. This is not right. Or if it's a review article and you have only one author, again it doesn't seem right. So they have certain criteria of how they identify the issues with authorship. What is conflict? Although this is the last one, I mean, all of us would have written conflict of interest, none. We just write that and move forward. But you have to be aware that these are competing interests which are defined as financial, personal, social, or other interests that are directly or indirectly influence the conduct of the author with respect to the particular manuscript. Now, having competing interests in a product is not ethical, not unethical. It's not unethical. You are working for a company. I mean, you are an advisor for a company for a particular product. It is not unethical, but not disclosing it is unethical. Okay, so you have a competing interest. You have a conflict of interest. You disclose it. It's for the reader's discretion. He can decide whether I will accept these results or not. It is not this one. Okay. So you have to be aware of that. So direct conflict of interest emerges when the author derives employment, owns stocks, or patents of the product. Indirect arises when author receives honoraria or research grants to do a particular study. So always in case of conflicts of interest, authors are advised to err on the side of declaration of all their financial disclosures, irrespective of whether they think it will apply to that particular manuscript or not. You might be working on something else, some other company, and you're writing some other paper. It's okay to disclose the financial interest, and then it's for the author to it's for the reader to decide whether he wants to accept that findings or not. Okay. Now this is become a very important fraud of late, that a few years, even now, certain journals suggest reviewers. When you're submitting, they say suggest reviewers. Nowadays, some of the journals have removed that thing. So you suggest your colleague, and some of them actually there was I think there was a case in one of the forums. So the reviewer asked the authors, what comments do you want me to send? So they will send the same, you write, send these comments. That is sent, and then it is easily replied back. So they're accepted faster. This is a fraud, basically. How are they identified? Basically, if the reviewers' emails are suspicious, or there's a fictitious name, or it's the same reviewer who's going on reviewing every article from this particular group. Or how do journals review it? Every review, they send it to reviewers, and within a day it is replied back. It's difficult for any reviewer who has to read through the article. So they have, like, in a month they have 10 articles which are reviewed and sent. That's how they identify peer review frauds. How do we identify it or eliminate it? Usually, most of the journals now ask for ORCID or Fablon's ID. So then they know they review the reviewers. So the Elsevier or Scopus, they review the reviewers, how they've done the reviewing, and then they're given some scores also. So it's easy to identify the best reviewers, and they use the same reviewers. So nowadays, some of the journals have stopped asking the authors for suggesting reviewers. What happens if it is detected, if a fraud, misconduct is detected? I've already gone through it. Initially, it is contacting the authors. The editorial board is contact the authors and inform them of the misconduct. If the authors acknowledge and accept it, the paper is rejected. The leadership of the author's institution is informed. Okay. If the paper is already published and the author is provided an opportunity for self-confession, if the misconduct, so an erratum is issued in the journal. If it's a major misconduct, it will be revoked. The paper will be retracted. Authors can be blacklisted by the journal, and if authors deny their misconduct, they're told this is the identified misconduct, it is denied, then they have their own guidelines. The journals, they take cognizance of it, and appropriate action will be taken. Usually they'll be blacklisted, and their ethics committee or the national societies like Ophthalmology Society or API, whatever, they are informed, and suitable punishment according to the SOPs will be handed out. So before I summarize, so publication misconduct can happen at every level. So beginning with the approval and consent, make sure that you have the necessary approval from the institutional review boards. You have a documented informed consent which you keep for at least 5 years. Data accuracy, falsification, fabrication is not accepted, and all the data, raw data. When I say data, it has to be raw data in your Excel sheet what you have maintained, has to be preserved for at least minimum 5 years. Plagiarism and self-plagiarism, again, you use plagiarism softwares, little bit, turn it in, and make sure that it's not a copy paste. It falls well within the accepted levels of plagiarism. If there's a submission fraud, is not acceptable. I mean, if you're submitting duplicate submissions or you're submitting simultaneous publications, it's not acceptable. Please don't do that. Ethics of authorship. From the beginning, talk to all your co-authors, sign a document that all of you are aware, okay, I'm going to do these things and I'll be the first author. I'll do these things, I'll be the second author. That should be there from the beginning, so that in the end, you don't fight it out. No, I want to be the first author. I've not yet got promotion. I want to be the second author. No, that shouldn't happen, because everybody can do it. Then conflict of interest, if you have any, you please declare it. So we come to the end. So publication, ethics starts from research and publication, culminates in publication. So be aware of all the misconducts that can happen, and let's not get into into substantiating ourselves or trying to prove that we have not done misconduct. If it is accidental, let's just stop it at that and then continue with good research practices. Thank you.
Very quick comments or questions before we go into the next session. Because this is a very important thing, and believe me, like in this context, like ignorance is sometimes not a bliss. Many of us who have published, we realize that like the nuances hit us only when it hits us. Because if you are publishing, I mean, like honestly, like 20 papers, 30 papers, 50 papers, if you have on your this thing, somewhere when I look back, there will be a gray zone where we might have done something which we were not aware. But today, you mean like this generation of younger researchers cannot feign that ignorance for the reason the workshops that we are conducting, the kind of material that is available online for you to see, and the tools to avoid it are plenty. Earlier, when we used to write a paragraph, it might have been similar. What Dr. Tanuja told is the similarity index in Turnitin or this thing. And 12%, 14%, 16%, it would have been similar. The second thing is like some of the things were not explicitly spelled out about the ghost authorship, gift authorship, exclusion, salami, and all those things. And it was sort of accepted as a professional norm. अरे thesis, 2 paper तो बनाएंगे इस पे. PhD, 5 papers, nothing wrong. Even today, in a large multi-centric trial, you can have 5 papers. But say that the methodology has been given in paper 1. The results pertaining to infectious component has been given in paper 2. The preventive strategies have been given in paper 4. Nothing wrong in doing that. And an overall paper. And for all the whatever that is what I told. Being transparent and explicitly stating what we are doing to a large extent will nullify the question marks that would be put around it. And authorship, we have realized that like before the study starts, please list the authors, order of the authors, list the authors. When people come to DRP, especially for collaboration research, we make this letter of association. Many times somebody asks, so we have an MOU, why do you need a letter of association? There we have given a paragraph that the authorship, patents, IPR will be discussed a priori so that they know that who is going to do what. And this happens with the best of best, because each one of us are relatively selfish, there is nothing wrong. I have contributed, I have given my idea, this is my effort. Without this, can they do that? All these are justifiable, nothing wrong in that. But you really sort it out because it gets only subsequent. The second thing is also with regards to the exclusion of authors. Authorship is a privilege. It's a privilege and a right. Wherein if you have contributed, you have the right to be there. But to fulfill that criteria of substantial contribution, drafting, collecting, compiling, analyzing, reporting of the data, preparation of the manuscript, and owning responsibility for what is going to be published is very important. Many a times, I am in a meeting where the idea is discussed and I have given my 2 cents as a technical expert, but I expect to be in the author of the publication after 10 years of that hard work. No, sir, you will be acknowledged. One of the important sections in authorship is also acknowledgement. Absolutely. So if you've given your 2 cents, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be. So you have a privilege and a right to be acknowledged. There is a difference. That is where the ICMJE guidelines says that who can be authors and who needs to be acknowledged and who needs to be there in the acknowledgement. Even a person who has reviewed it as a technical reviewer can be acknowledged provided there is no substantial contribution to the manuscript. Nothing wrong. Only if you have been there as a part of the thing, you need to be included. And also the spouse, I told you, like if there is substantial contribution in collecting, compiling, analyzing, and writing the manuscript, nothing wrong in it. Because we tend to hesitate. How can I include a friend's name? But as long as it is following the principles of ethics, principles of authorship, and if you can justify the role, that is where when we made the DRP template, we have taken it from the credit statement, which is a consortium of Harvard, Stanford, Oxford, all Fords put together, and they have told that you pick the role. When they say contributed, they have defined that. You pick, and a person can have more than one role. If you have picked it, and if you have listed it in the authorship, there is no problem with that. Statistical analysis, obviously, it will be there, provided there is substantial. So in that sense, like, please use the templates. We are going to have it on the website. The DRP template is there. The SOP templates will be there. So please use it, which will avoid help. And also this retraction and all is very, very nasty nowadays. Very nasty. And they will blacklist not just the individual, sometimes the department, sometimes the institution. If there are more than 4 retractions from an institution, the institution gets blacklisted. And some of the open access journals, very good journals. Currently, I'm working as an editorial member for Frontiers, very reputed. Sometimes I felt it's an uneasy feeling you get. The process was a little bit compromised, so we held on to it, asked for another reviewer who wrote black and white that it's wrong, and the paper got rejected. We are on the editorial team. We have submitted one paper as this thing. Out of 3 papers, 1 paper we were a little bit shaky from the reviews. So we thought that, like, is it okay? So we asked for another reviewer who knocked it off and told this is not going to be accepted. We are happy. So please be aware, open access journals, very rapid turnaround times. Date of submission 5th August, date of publication 8th August. After peer review, possible. In fact, I have not even opened my mail from the editor to give my review comments. Review comments, it takes 15 days, especially in COVID, 1 month. See, we criticize the journals. Yeah, sir, after sending it, I have forgotten that I have sent it. So in that sense, like, it takes the time because that is the natural time for someone to read review. Fast track is there, like in 5 days, 7 days, provided everything is checked and checked. So in open access, please be aware, very rapid turnaround time. It is something like express delivery, 24 hours, washing and ironing. Please don't believe that. It would be something wrong. And also curious, and some of them are doing that in a proper way. So when I'm saying that not all, you cannot generalize, but please be aware that something which is too good to be true, it is indexed in Scopus, it is indexed in PubMed, it is indexed in DOAJ. No money is taken, sir. Within 48 hours, they will publish, sir. My friend has published and it is accepted for promotion. What shall I do? Please be very afraid. Only if you find the article in the Scopus. The journal can claim anything. Today, like most of their journals will say, applied for indexing in Scopus. That applied for indexing is in small font. You ask Ratesh, she is an expert, she will tell. So in that sense, it is very, very, very difficult for us to know where what is there. So without much ado, I would request Anuradha ma'am, who has been there for a long time in the IEC and has been guiding the institutional ethics review processes of the institution, to share her thoughts and experience on the matter. I'm on to you, please.
I wanted to move out of it. I'm waiting. For great opportunity. Thanks for our DRP team. I'll be talking on one of the important aspects. I know most of you don't like it. Okay.
We don't have a choice.
and you don't have a choice, and I don't have a shortcut. Okay. And it's an ethics committee overview of policies and procedures. I'll be just telling brief history about how the ethics committee started, because you need to know it. Okay, not only for the sake of this one, as per the NAC also, you need to know, like, when our ethics committee got registered and under which regulatory bodies it is registered, all those things. And most of the time, whenever I receive a letter, they'll ask me, like, what is the name of the ethics committee? Okay, and some people will write institutional review board. Some people will write institutional ethics committee. Now it is named as just ethics committee. If you write institutional ethics committee, I will ask you to reply. Okay,
It is earlier it was called as Institutional Ethics Committee. Earlier, our Ramaya Ethics Committee. Now it is registered as Ethics Committee, MS Ramaya Medical College and Hospitals. This is the address of the Ethics Committee. Okay, and it started way back in August 2000. And that time, as Dr. Nanda mentioned, like it is also one of the Ethics Committee which was not registered. Okay, and lot of clinical trial took place. And when the issue started around 2010 to 2013, then the government started making mandatory that only the registered ethics committee should give an approval for conducting the clinical trials. Okay. Hence, like our ethics committee got registered in the year 2013 on April 13. Got registered under the Central Licensing Authority, that is CDSEO, in the year 2013. As per that SCLA, the Central Licensing Authority, every 3 years we need to renew it. Okay, we renewed in 2016, 19. Recently, we applied for the renewal. Okay, since because our members list has to be modified, we were due in April. But since if the member leaves the committee or joins the committee, we need to intimate to the DCGI. And since we are like short by 1 or 2 months, recently we renewed it, and now the approval is there for 5 years as per the new rules. Earlier it was for 3 years. Now it is renewed for next 5 years. And in 2019, ICMR made it mandatory that all the academic protocols should be cleared by the ethics committee, which are registered under PHR. Okay, though it is not mandatory and most of the medical colleges are not registered, we also a little bit delayed, but we registered on 26 February 2021, and we are in the probationary period. Like provisional registration they have given, it is for 2 years. Once the provisional registration is over for 2 years, then it is the permanent registration for another 2 years. And we have one more gap, that is the NABH accreditation for the ethics committee. Actually, they mentioned it as a mandatory in 2016 for all the ethics committee who are involved in the clinical trials. So because of that, we also went for it. Now it is not mandatory. Okay, but we went for it that time. Like after we got it, like I was in the first medical college, we got the NABH accreditation, and few couple of medical colleges I got it in Mumbai and other places. But in Karnataka, I think not even one medical college apart from us has got the NABH. But it's a tedious process, you are not. And we renewed it again in 2021 for the next another 20. Up to it is valid up to 2022. And any protocols is to get approval from the ethics committee, it has to go through the proper channel. We have a policy according to the institution. As Dr. Nanda mentioned, first it has to go through DRP. Okay, first you have to submit the proposal to the DRP. Okay, many times you come directly to PC, we don't accept. Please go to the DRP, and then you have to take a registration number. After like submitting to the DRP, with I think they have a prescribed format, you need to fill in that and get an approval after getting reviews by them, not just a number. Okay, then once it is approved, getting the number of the DRP, then it should be applied. It should be applied to the scientific committee. This is the committee, scientific committee members, there are 6 members, and usually we have a schedule, like how the meeting is to be conducted for 1 year. Okay, that schedule has been sent to every faculty at the beginning of the year itself. Both the scientific committee and the ethics committee schedule has been sent along with the procedure how it is conducted. And this is the list of ethics committee members. We have right now 10 members. And how the composition of this ethics committee is made, it is multidisciplinary and multi-sectorial because everybody has their own role. And 50% should be from the institution and 50% should be from the outside the institution. And it should be a mix of medical and non-medical members. And it should also comprise various age groups. And also it should represent both the genders. And now it is mandatory, like 50% should be non-affiliated. Out of 10, 5 people were from the outsiders, and the chairperson is from the outside, and our chairperson is the retired High Court judge. What is the scope of ethics committee? To protect human research participants, I think from the beginning of this workshop we are discussing, to prevent unethical trials and protect the rights, safety, and well-being of the trial participants, and to assess if there is any ethical issues involved in the course of the trials or during the conduct of the study. And it should be addressed in conformity with social, cultural, and legal requirements. And we should evaluate the scientific rationale of research projects. We should also assess conformity to Indian ethical guidelines, regulations, and protection of IPR of Indian researchers in international studies. And this is also discussed again as per the Belmont principles. We should check for the following ethical values. We should, after giving the approval for conducting the studies, our job doesn't end over there. We have to monitor. Actually, we do a strict monitoring for the clinical trials. Right now, more than 30 clinical trials are going on in our campus. But since we don't have much time, we're not doing that monitoring thing for the academic trials. Since ours is registered in DHR in the year 2021, they might come for audit anytime. Many of your studies can be picked up and can be audited. So whatever the documents you submit, whatever the process you want to do it with the course of the trial, please document it properly and be prepared anytime it can be audited and audited by the ICMR DHR. Okay, to implement measures to identify and manage any real potential or perceived conflict of interest of EC members and all the researchers, to handle or review any complaints about research or the conduct of research on humans. We keep taking the feedback from the participants who are involved in the clinical trials every month. We randomly send them the feedback. We get the report from them, feedback. And sometimes I do call the participants randomly. I take the feedback in which trial you have participated. What is your opinion on that? How are you aware of all these things? Was there any inducement? All these questions we do ask for it, not to see whether the process is going on in a manner what we expect. But we are not doing the academic studies. We can do it.
Built in
We
short
should
term.
do it preferably, but they require more manpower, and everybody is multitasking. And this is the policy which we follow, and the functioning of the ethics committee as well as the conduct of your research should be based on these guidelines. Okay, there are a lot of guidelines. These are the guidelines which we need to follow right now. It is National Ethical Guidelines for Biomedical and Health Research involving human participants, what Dr. Nanda described in the beginning. And then we also have National Ethical Guidelines for Biomedical Research involving children, and National Guidelines for Stem Cell Research 2017, Medical Device Rules 2017. And you should be aware of this New Drug Clinical Trial Rules 2019. It is not only applicable for the clinical trial, it is also applicable for the academic research. It is given in the chapter 4 of this NDCG. Okay. And then recently we have a guidelines, National Guidelines for the Hematopoietic Cell Transplantation, which is released in 2021. And along with this, based on these guidelines, okay, before the introduction of these NDCT rules in 2019, we were following drugs and cosmetic rules, okay, 1945, and then Schedule Y. Okay, and that was replaced by this New Drug Clinical Trial Rules 2019. And now it is outdated, Schedule Y is outdated. And using these guidelines, we have framed our own SOPs, and it is mandatory. Every ethics committee should have a SOP. And we have modified several times. The recent one is the version plugin. And even it has like more than 2 pages. And this is the list of our various chapters which is there in our SOPs. Okay, like how to, like there is a SOP, like first how to prepare SOP is the first chapter, and then like how it is constituted, and what is the application procedure, review procedure, and how the meetings should be conducted, agenda, all those things, and if there is any amendment, what is the process involved, what are the various review procedures, how to review any serious adverse events, and how to calculate the compensation, and how to do the site monitoring, and how to deal with the vulnerable population. And then last but not least, the 14th chapter is Ethics Committee fee structure for the protocol review. Right now, we are not charging anything for the academic protocols, but for the clinical trials, it is charged. And what is the procedure which is followed in our institution after obtaining the DRP number? We have to submit to the scientific committee. Always sometimes we get the protocol one day prior to it, lot of pressure will come, which we don't like to entertain. But preferably, we should have adequate time to go through the protocols. That is the rationale of submitting it 3 days prior to this, because we don't have much time. You need some time to go through the protocols, not just for the sake of giving the approval, for the benefit of your protocol itself. Because we can review it if there is any modification required, we can approach to you to improve the quality of your proposal. And applicant or the principal investigator should submit 3 weeks before the schedule of the scientific committee as per the SOPs just mentioned. And it should be discussed in the scientific committee, and whatever the decision takes place in the scientific committee will be forwarded to the ethics committee. Sometimes it can be rejected in the scientific committee itself. So if it is something after revision, if it is okay, we can take up, like it will be forwarded to the ethics committee. In the ethics committee, we receive the proposal, then we send to the reviewers, other members. As I mentioned, like we not only have internal members, we also have 50% external members. Those external members should go through these protocols. And we'll prepare an agenda, fix up the meeting, and in the meeting we discuss it in detail. We'll prepare a minutes of meeting. That minutes will be approved later on by all the members. That is the reason, like we can't give the approval certificate immediately, because sometimes there will be pressure, like after discussing ethics committee evening, when I get the approval letter. That is not possible from my side as well, because the minutes should be vetted by all the members, should be approved by the chairperson also. That will take another 2-3 days. And usually the minutes will not run in 1 page or 2 pages, it will be more than 50 pages. Whatever we ask, whatever we say, it will be documented in the minutes. And finally, it will be communicated to the principal investigator, and appropriate decision to take. And what are the decisions, how we take the decisions? Like it is based on the broad consensus, 50%, like more than 50% agree, we will go for it. And it's usually we go with the consensus, not by the voting. If somebody objects, then we'll ask for the reasons. And there are various decisions can be taken. One is approved with or without suggestions or comments. Second is it can be suggested with the minor amendments, and then like member secretary can explain if you submit the revised protocol with the minor amendments. If there is major amendments, you have to resubmit to the ethics committee and to be discussed in the committee. Only if there is minor, some like not much involved in any patient safety, that can be processed like without the full committee. Otherwise, I'm not eligible to give an approval. That is there in the SOP as well. And sometimes we can take a decision like not approved with reasons, including termination or removal from permission. There are instances we have rejected even the clinical trials. And then if there is any outstanding issues, it can be addressed at the level of member secretary, should be addressed within 30 days, or else a revised protocol should be submitted and will be taken up for the next meeting. And after the approval, the letter will be issued to the primary principal investigator. What are the documents needs to be submitted by the principal investigator to the ethics committee? First and foremost, the protocol, complete protocol, not the incomplete one. Many times, so many columns were not filled up. Okay, like hypothesis, they say there is no requirement of hypothesis, there is no objectives. Sometimes there is no procedure itself. Okay, so that is mandatory. And then along with that, one more important document is informed consent form. Case pro forma, if they have a association with the other institution MOU, and then sometimes like you need to take a permission letter, some of the authorities, like if you are conducting a study in a school or in a community or in certain institutions, you should take a permission letter from those people. Okay, for that, like we seek even the permission letter also. And as Dr. Nanda mentioned, if you have a collaboration with the international body, then we need to ask even the letters from HMS approval for sharing the data or for the transfer of any of our biological materials. What is an informed consent? Because I've been told to stress a little bit more on this. What is informed consent? Anybody? Is it a document or a process? It's a process. It's a both, but it's a process, it should be documented. It's not a document per se, it's a process primarily.
Culminates into a
Document. But what is happening? We are concentrating more on the document, not on the process. But the process should be documented. By definition, it is a process by which a subject voluntarily confirms his or her willingness to participate in a particular trial after having been informed of all aspects of the trial that are relevant to the subject's decision to participate as per the ICPCP E6 guidelines. As per this ICMR National Ethical Guidelines, the researcher must obtain voluntary in written informed consent to the prospective participant for any biomedical and health research involving human participants. We should not use the word patients whenever we are involving them as a part of the study. We try to used to use earlier, like in most of the other foreign nations, they use subject. But here we prefer to use participants when our ICMR documents say participants. And never we should use the word patients. Okay. This requirement is based on the principle that competent individuals are entitled to choose freely whether or not to participate or continue to participate in the research. Initially, they might agree to participate in the study. Meantime, they don't want to continue it. They can visit at any time of during the course of your study. Okay, you should give that permission for that. If they are authorized, like they are eligible to withdraw from the study anytime. I just wanted you people to go through this. An investigator interviews a potential research participant for a clinical trial in type 2 diabetes patients. He explains the purpose of the study, procedure, foreseeable risk, etc. to the patient. The patient smiles at the investigator and says, "I'm a simple man. I don't understand what you're telling, all this medical stuff, and I don't think I will ever will. But if you believe I should participate in this study, I will." Because most of the time, I think you will come across this type of situation. Would it be ethical to enroll this patient into the study? No. Why you don't want to get enrolled?
He should be told in his own language. It should be made
So he said like,
ಹೇಳದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ
he said,
ಡಾಕ್ಟ್ರೆ ನೀವು ಹೇಳಿದ ಡಾಕ್ಟ್ರೆ ನೀವು ತಗೊಳ್ಳಿ ಅಂತ
he
ತಗೊಂತೀವಿ
said like medical stuff I don't understand. Like how will you make him understand?
his own language where he
ಕನ್ನಡದಾಗ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ they will say ಮೇಡಮ್ ನೀವ್ ಹೇಳಿ ಡಾಕ್ಟ್ರೆ you sit
Yeah.
at the time that
Actually,
ಡಾಕ್ಟ್ರೆ ನೀವ್ ಹೇಳಿ whatever you feel is good for me I believe in you you please tell me ನೀವು ಓಕೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ ನನ್ಗೆ ಇದು ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಿಲ್ಲ ನೀವು ಹೇಳ್ತಿದ್ದೀರೋ it is okay.
so it is not acceptable. Yeah, it is not acceptable. You have to tell it in his own language, not only verbally. What I said mention is you should document it. Whatever you said, and like if the person does not understand English, if you have an informed consent in the English, you cannot take it in the English. Okay, it should be in their language of understanding and the language which he can be able to read. For example, if you don't have a Kannada version or the Telugu version, we have many other language people who come to us. Okay, that time we need to take an impartial witness if we don't have any other choice. Means the person who knows to read and write English, and he should be able to convert those material to the person in his language, not me. That person, the person who knows to read and write, because I can convey whatever I want. Okay, I can mislead the participant.
As madam is saying, the research associate who can speak that language cannot be an impartial witness.
Yeah.
Many times we end up doing that.
He cannot be an impartial witness. That person should not be a part of the study. He is someone bystander. He can be a bystander. Okay.
The employees or subordinates of the worker, they cannot be an impartial witness.
But most of the time, what will happen is we take somebody whom we know it should not be done.
But here, if somebody convinces him, then we can enroll the patient.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can enroll, but we should document this.
But we taking the decision for them, it will be against the principle. So as long as the person is convinced,
And he should take his signature and name, whoever is involved, that the witness also, and come to that format later. And for example, let us see this. It's 12:45 p.m. This is situation also it will come across many times. The hematology test counter closes like 1 p.m. Sorry, that
lunch for 1
yeah, 1 p.m. for lunch and will reopen at 3 p.m. The PA's trial participant has just come, who told her yesterday in the OPD that he will participate in a study. The PA decides I will just draw the blood sample quickly and send it to the lab by 1 p.m. and take the informed concentration. Is it acceptable? What you should have done in this case? First, he should take the informed consent, and by chance, sometimes he may not ready to get pricked or ready to give the sample. You cannot take the sample and send it. Later, you cannot take the informed consent. People do come across these situations and will not give importance. Please don't like have a shortcuts. Follow the procedures.
because he questioned the madam when she put it, one of the responses earlier was, So sample ತಗೊಂಡಿರ್ತೀವಿ ಸರ್ ಅವ್ರು ಬೇಡ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಬಿಸಾಕ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀವಿ.
No.
You cannot.
No, by chance when they come for the audit, they say like informed consent or the sample. ಇಲ್ಲ ಮುಂಚೆನೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರ್ತಾರೆ.
So that would be a deviation.
Then it is over. Then you are major
It
deviation.
includes everything. There's participation, sitting, everything.
And the sequential order is what is also important. It is not that like everything is ticked. In what order it was done.
Many times what will happen is like if you start filling the form later on, once the patient leaves the clinic or leaves the place, that is not acceptable again.
Right.
That time leads to manipulation. You should do documentation in front of the patient, and actually you have to give one copy of the informed consent to the patient. You will never do it.
Information brochure or
Yeah.
information booklet which contains all the details and also.
But it is done in the clinical trials, but not done in the academic trials, has to be done. But we write it in the approval letter. I think if you have, anybody has got the approval letter who are doing the prospective study, you can see the last sentence, it is there. Because we want to save ourselves also.
No, that booklet means while we are at the topic, that booklet will contain the detailed protocol, expected outcome, expected benefits, and also will say that the individual might not benefit from that thing. Because that is very important for them to know that like I am there, like what is going my benefit. So that consent will not be restricted to participation alone, but also the outcome, which will be very clearly delineating it.
So what are the components involved in this informed consent process? Disclosure of accurate information, whatever is relevant. Competence, only the you should tell in such a way like he is able to understand it, ability to understand and make the informed decision. If finally say like the again decision I can take, that is wrong. He should decide. You should make him understand and he should decide whether he can participate in the study or not. And comprehension of the information provided. I cannot put medical jargons in the informed consent form. It should be the layman's understandable language. And voluntariness of participation. And what constitutes a valid informed consent? Consent given by a competent individual who is able to read, write, understand, and who has received a necessary information related to the study, has understood the information, and having understood the information has arrived at a decision that without any coercion, he can participate in the study. Only with this understanding, he can give a valid informed consent. Okay, he should be competent, receive the necessary information, he can able to make a decision out of the information which he has received without any inducement or coercion. For example, if he is not competent, like what is the other mode of taking an informed consent? I said he is a competent. There can be certain situations like we would like to include in the study based on the protocol, but he is not able to, he is not competent in giving a consent.
And there be a proxy consent.
And in that case, we can take it from the LAR, legally authorized persons. Okay, for example, in case of minors, we take it from the guardians and guardians. If the patient is the ICU patients, if that is the criteria of inclusion criteria, then we'll take it from the guardian. But and one thing you should remember that informed consent is not a one-time consenting. Initially, we take it and it's not done. No. By chance, if there is any amendment in the protocol, we need to take the consenting always. Okay. Otherwise, if there is any additional information you have added in the protocol, you need to amend the informed consent, and latest informed consent should be taken even though the participant has given the earlier consent. And for example, I said in case of person who is unconscious, you will take a consent to the LAR. By chance, the person becomes conscious after 4 days or 5 days. Okay, when he is improving from his disease condition, that time do you want to take a consent or not? Yes. You should take a consent once he gets his consciousness. Okay, the consenting should be allowed, though the LAR has consented for that particular participant. Okay, that's why like, it is a continuous process in some of the conditions. And this informed consent includes 2 parts. It's many times I find only one sheet. Okay, it's also like that one sheet what we give is informed consent form. It should be it should be provided along with the other part also, that is the participant information sheet. It should provide known facts about the research which has relevance to the participation. I think there is a, as Tanuja mentioned, like there is a DCJ format, ICMR format. In that format, there will be several columns to fill for the participant information sheet. It should be a detailed information for the participants. What are the standard of care available and what are the benefits of from this research? What are the risks involved and how much is getting as an out-of-pocket expenses for participating in the study? And in case if there is any injury or any adverse events or serious adverse events, what are the composition is given and under what guidelines the composition is given? What is the, everything should be mentioned in the part 1. And along with that, the part 2 contains participant acknowledgement. And where he has mentioned that I have understood the information and I am willing to participate in this study. And in case if there is a person who is illiterate, then you should have a thumb impression along with the information details. What are the requisites of informed consent? Informed consent document should not be too long or too short. Should contain adequate information. All the components should be included. Informed consent document should be in the patient's native language, preferably. Also, the time it should be preferable. For example, if you are doing a study in the community, I cannot expect him to know the English. You should have that community, the common language, you should have it in that language itself. That time we don't approve it in the English language. Okay. And use of ethics committee approved versions. If you have any amendments in the ICF, the approved version should be submitted, like sorry, approved version should be taken. And use of, sorry, it is the researchers and the ethics committee too responsibility to ensure that the translation is accurate. If I do not understand Telugu or Tamil, I should approach somebody who can able to explain me that language, and we should always do the back translation to ensure that whatever is translated into the other local language is covering the same thing whatever is there in the English language. And for individuals who are physically or mentally incapable of giving voluntary informed consent, consent by the area that is legally acceptable representative must be obtained. Consent to be obtained before undertaking any clinical procedures. I told you in that experiment, in that incident, like you cannot take the blood sample prior to the consenting. Consenting should be taken first. That will before screening. Sufficient time for participants to consider the information, time and opportunity to ask questions. How much time you take to, like how much time you need to take an informed consent from a participant? Should be like minimum 15 minutes to 30 minutes. Many times, you know, it will be 1 minute. That is not consenting. Okay, you should explain it. It takes 10 minutes. If he has any queries, you should clarify it. It will take another 10 minutes. And just in the simple way, in the clinical trials, it will take sometimes 45 minutes to 1 hour itself. Okay, you should give adequate time, sufficient time for the participant to understand what is the study about, and I am participating on my own. And no unjustifiable promises or coercion should be made. Free samples, free treatment, should not do all these inducements. Okay, you should say whatever the research procedure is involved. Test of understanding to be administered at the end of discussion. Means like I have understood it completely. That sentence should be there in the informed consent form. Researchers should be appropriately qualified. Who can take in consent? Anybody? Like for example, if P3 are the investigators, can I allow the nurse to take a consent or my PG student to take a consent? No. The person should be competent. Whoever is part of the research team, your study team, should take the consent. You cannot assign that work to anybody else. Researchers should be appropriately qualified, trained, should be able to read, write, understand, communicate in the language of informed consent. To maintain the privacy and confidentiality of participants at all stages. Why we are telling, like, why the researchers who are confident enough for part of the study to take it is because they are the ones who have signed this privacy and confidentiality form. And they know, and I cannot disclose about the research to other people. They might breach the confidentiality. That is the reason it is the responsibility of the investigators to take the consent in a confidential way. And a copy of signed informed consent document should be handed over to the participants. One copy needs to be taken, and one more copy, the Xerox copy, should be given to the participants always. And who can sign it? Participants or participants legally accepted representatives should sign. And then the person who is conducting the informed consent discussion, that person also should sign. That are investigators. If participant is illiterate, a literate impartial witness attends the informed consent process. And if the participant is not able to sign, though he is illiterate, he can take a thumb impression along with the LAR signature. And when you take the LAR, and if the LAR is also illiterate, then you should take an impartial. What's the provision for like how to take a consent in the pediatric age, and which age in the pediatrics? What is the mode of taking a consent? There is no need to document assent for children below 7 years. And approval of older children, that is 7 to 18 years, assent required as they understand the concepts. Okay, we have to take a consent from the age of 7 years up to 18 years. From 7 to 12 years, up to 12 years, we can take a verbal assent along with the consenting from the guardian or the parent. Whereas between 12 to 18 years, we must explain the for the child in its own language, and then two documents should be signed, one from the parent or the LAR and one from the child who is between 12 to 18 years. Okay, and for example, if the child is not willing to participate, and if the parent or LAR wanted the child to participate, would you like to include that person in the study or not? So you should never intervene. It is the primary responsibilities of the child. Child's dissent should be respected. If the child is not willing, though the parent and the LAR is willing, you cannot include him in the study. Both should accept, or both should be willing to participate in the study. And then as per the NDCT 2019, audiovisual recording should be done only for the vulnerable participants, because in the 2013 when a lot of issues were started, consenting is made mandatory for all that. It was very difficult. Nowadays they said like only for the vulnerable population it is applicable, not for all the clinical trials. Okay, for all other clinical trials, written informed consent is enough. And AV recording is mandatory for vulnerable participants. Who are vulnerable participants? Children, yes. Children and the elderly need not be, because they can understand. They can take their own decision. Children, of course, yes. Mentally challenged, psychiatric patients, prison inmates, and our students. Students are also vulnerable because we can coerce them. Okay, so there are vulnerable population because. And audio as per these NDCT rules, audio recording is mandated in case of clinical trials of anti-HIV and anti-retrovirals. Because here, because of the confidentiality issue, we don't go for AV mode of consenting. We go for just an audio. Audio video recording should be captured. Should capture the informed consent process, verbal consent, signature process, and time of initiation, and complete the consent process. How you take the audio visual? Not just like not the conversation. Along with the audio visual, to explain the procedure, you should give the handout to them, informed consent form. He has to read in front of you, and he has to explain you what he has read, what he has understood, and he has to sign in front of you. And all the procedures should be documented till the end. Okay, the audit. It usually takes around 45 minutes to 1 hour. Usually, when we go for an audit, we do check for the audio video consenting in some of the clinical trials. Conclude. Research should be conducted after approval by the ethics committee only, except for some of the things like review article, and follow the procedure and submit necessary documents for the EC approval. And because most of the time it will always be incomplete, we keep asking for it. I know, like we always get a cold response. And informed consent is not just a signature or a piece of paper. It's a process to ensure that the participants' autonomy is respected and their rights are protected. Okay, and these documents, which is required for the ethics committee, is not only to protect the participants, also to protect the researcher, okay, and also the ethics committee. It is to protect the whole system.
AE reporting one line.
AE reporting, like if there is any adverse effect which is not serious, you can report to the ethics committee like within 14 days or something. Like if there is any SAEs, usually in the clinical trial, they report every monthly basis. If there is just a AE, these adverse events, it is not serious. If there is any serious adverse events means if there is any hospitalization or if there is any life-threatening conditions related to the life-threatening conditions, or sometimes it can lead to death or any deformities. In those conditions, we have the researchers should report to the ethics committee within 24 hours. Even if it is 1 minute delay, it is not compliance, because they have to submit to the ethics committee even on the holidays within 24 hours of the occurrence of the serious adverse reactions. One intimation should be sent to the member secretary, one to the institutional head, okay, and then one to the sponsor. These 3 copies has to be made. Later on, like detailed description about the event has to be submitted to the AC within 14 days. We give time for 14 days. After 14 days, detailed discussion will be done in the ethics committee regarding the essays, whether the event has occurred, which has occurred is related to the trial or not. If it is related to the trial, then he is like compensation. He comes under the rule of compensation, then compensation will be paid for the participants who are involved. Okay. And there is a formula to calculate the compensation also. It is mainly for the trial patients. And for the academics, in case such events happen, what you do? Because many people wanted to do the new trials, like which is not, that it's not approved for the particular indications. And most of the time we are using the drug.
Repurposing.
Not only not repurposing, off-label.
Off-label.
Okay, repurposing is like permission to be sought before administering to the patient in the case of repurposing. For the off-label, we'll be using the drug rampantly for certain conditions, but it's not approved for that indications. And in case if you take such observations or as a study, then it will come as a clinical trial. But it's an academic clinical trial. In that condition, if there is any SAEs happens, a principal investigator and the institution is responsible. You can take a insurance for the particular study, and I think for some of you, I think Tina wanted to do one study, and we asked for it, the insurance to be taken for the particular study, and in case forbidden, like nothing will happen, by chance one case happens, it is amounts to compensation, and PA and the institution head is responsible. For the retrospective studies, not much ethical issues. Only thing is we ask them to keep the data anonymous and confidential. Then there will be waiving of the income tax. And we want to know what data you will be taking out from the study, and whether it is influencing the community, whether it is coming in a way of community influence, those things like religion, those comments will look for it, especially when they are giving it approval. Otherwise, like if it is a scientific, purely scientific basis, approval is simple. There's not much of ethical issues at all. We waive the consent to us. Whereas for the prospective studies, like it will require a lot of. Any other doubt?
Some journals ask for some consent waiver.
Yeah, actually for all the retrospective studies, I will mention in the approval. See, if anybody would have taken, I mentioned waiver of consent is given. I have mentioned.
Because as a rule in the
It should be
institution,
there.
because many people are online also listening, so you please apply to the ethics committee. That is the easiest, so that like the decision will be taken by the committee to make that waiver or
See,
not.
many times I come across situations that we are halting the research, we are not encouraging the research. It's not so. Yeah, we want the research to go in the right way,
Exactly.
because to have a good publication in an ethical way. Okay, because many times people will submit to the journal, and then we ask for the ethics committee approval. Okay, I'm not joking, because I have come across situations like people are presented with the results in the committee, scientific committee. Please make it as a retrospective and submit the proposal. Then later on you analyze the data after the approval of the ethics committee. Okay. These are sensitive issues, and
No, and also it should be discussed and made aware, because ignorance is no more a bliss. As I'm saying, any retrospective study or even surveys, like mobile surveys or things, we tend to take it lightly, but it will be having ethical implications, which the committee will be able to dissect and protect you in case of any challenges later on.
Problem is, in case if we hear like any complaints from the participant side, that time it means, because we have to protect the participants' rights and their safety. That is the priority. Because ethics committee is an independent body. Though we are part of the institution, we should actually take a decision independently. First, like we should promote the science, search, and right.
Any quick questions from the online participants? Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for that.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Excellent. And those who are participating in the BCPR exam, 7 MCQs will be answered from the session.
Salami was-
Salami.
And even the post publication.
Publication ethics, informed consent chapter also section 10 or 11. Many of the things like coercion, it should be in the same language, complete age, all these things.
Assent was vulnerable population.
Good afternoon, everybody. As we all know that at Ramaya, ethics are always held with a high value in all works of life, in all works, and research is no exception to that. And today's workshop by the Division of Research and Patents was with the intention of contributing towards enhancement of research culture at our institute. And we have been joined by learned audience both offline and online. Despite all of us being aware of ethics in research and in practice, like Tanuja ma'am emphasized that a lot of times accidental violation of ethics can occur. And that's why this workshop, I speak on behalf of all the participants today, should have gone a long way in clearing up a lot of doubts that may have been in our minds. The introductory session talk was given by Shalini ma'am. It was a crisp talk where ma'am emphasized on the principles of ethics, including beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. And Nankumar sir spoke today and was an enlightening talk on biomedical research ethics. And the highlight of the talk was sir made us aware of SCMR handbook on bioethics research, a 16-page handbook, which will be very useful to all of us whenever we do proceed to participate or to conduct research. And Tanuja ma'am gave a very nice talk regarding publication ethics and misconducts in publication, and including a checklist, publication checklist, ethics checklist at the end, which I think would be very useful for all of us. In fact, ma'am gave several examples of retracted papers, and that was personally, even I did not think that I need to keep data preserved for up to 5 years, because even after publication, a lot of times we think once the article is published, we're done, and there's not going to be any more hassles. But there may be challenges anytime, and up to 5 years, we do need to preserve the data in case there are questions asked. So I thank ma'am for her talk. And Anuradha ma'am gave us a very elaborate talk on the intricacies of the working as well as the composition of the ethics committee at Ramaya, and a very detailed talk regarding informed consent. I thank ma'am for her talk also. And lastly, I thank all the audience members, both offline and online. And we really hope that today's workshop was of benefit to all of you. If there are no questions from the online audience members also.
Chat box
I request Nanda sir to your final words.
This is thank you. You'll have a cup of tea, then we'll see. But the offline, that is the benefit.